June, what is today, 13th meeting of the Environment Committee to order. We have an agenda. If there are no concerns about the agenda, we'll consider it approved, which brings us to the minutes of the May 9th, 2023 Environment Committee minutes. Is there any changes to the minutes? Seeing none, I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. We have no consent business, so we'll move on to the non-consent business. The first item is 2023-102, the 2023 Unified Budget Amendment, second quarter. We have Ned Smith and Adam Gordon with us. Are you surprised that he's here?
I'm so grateful that he's here. Good afternoon, council members and Chair Wolf. My name is Ned Smith. I'm the Director of Pretreatment and Finance for Environmental Services, and I am joined by
Adam Gordon, who's the Interceptor Engineering Manager.
Thank you. So for a bit of context, every year we do set a total budget. It's called our unified budget, and that includes our capital budget and our operating budget. And that is getting built throughout the year. In fact, at our next meeting, you're going to learn about our rates and charges. You've seen our budget. The next meeting in July is when we actually approve the rates that we're going to charge our customers. That will then get folded into a larger overall operating budget, which gets presented in August, and then around October 22nd, all of it gets rolled up with the rest of the council into a total unified budget, which is, again, capital and operating, gets released for public comment, and then you'll finally approve it in December. But throughout the year, occasionally we have things that need to move around a little bit here and there. We might need to increase some funding on some projects and decrease some funding on others. Sometimes we'll get additional allocations from the legislative session, so we'd come in with an operating budget amendment. That's probably going to come in a couple of months, in our third quarter amendment, based on the legislative activity. But today we have a change to our capital program, and we're just going to walk through briefly what those are. So, excuse me, at a high level, we are moving money from 8063, which is the SWC Interceptor for Lake Elmo connections. We're moving $15 million down to the 8086 North Interceptor improvements. Those are both in the Lake Elmo area. And then we also need to grow the overall plan for 8086 by another $40 million. And then based on some contractor estimates that we've gotten, we're going to need to increase the Hastings Wastewater Treatment Plant by $4 million. And I'll walk through what those look like. On L77, this is in both of those, 8063 and 8086. This is, as you might or might not know, Lake Elmo is one of our newer customers. They used to have some very large city-run septic tanks and septic systems that they are now moving on to the Met Council system. And so we are establishing some service to them we'll need some interceptors as well as lift stations. So one of those is the lift station L77. It's an improvement to take the additional flow because they're very close to existing customers like Woodbury. So this is just integrating them into our system. And then on the southwest Lake Elmo service extension, this again is to improve the city service of the city of Lake Elmo, both for their initial connection, but also because of their growth. They're having a lot of growth in those areas, so we need to provide additional capacity. So this is a gravity sanitary line. It does go under I-94. We're trying to coordinate with MnDOT as well as the opening of the Gold Line. So usually when somebody digs up a highway, we try to stay in close contact with our partners. So if something's coming where, we're somewhere between now and 10 years out, we need to look at that. If MnDOT calls us and says we're digging up a highway now, we'll look at our systems and say, you know what, we were just about to do that anyway, so let's get in there and get it done so it's cheaper for everybody involved. So this is a large diameter tunneling because it's due to the pipe depth as well as site constraints. So we're running into some issues where there are some risks there. It's not ideal soil, and we're also getting some clusters of boulders and cobbles, and that can increase the expense for that drilling. It's very, you have to change some of the equipment, get some larger bore equipment for that. So this, the increase in funding is to cover those costs. In addition, the Hastings Wastewater Treatment Plant, as I'm sure, I hope you're aware, we are we will be building a new wastewater treatment plant to serve Hastings and some of the surrounding areas. If you're not familiar, the current Hastings Wastewater Treatment Plant is right downtown. If you walk down Main Street to the river and look to your right, it's right there. So we are going to move that, both because it's time for a little bit of growth in that area and also because we want to kind of give that, release that downtown real estate back for a more valuable purpose. Not that there's anything more valuable than wastewater treatment, but that is prime real estate, and I think it would be better for all. Now, what's tricky about that and about Hastings is unique is we don't have any interceptors in Hastings. It's all city pipes that they bring directly to our plant. And so rather than try to rewire the entire underground piping system of the city of Hastings, we're basically going to run an interceptor from where the plant used to be. So all of the city pipes can still take it to the exact same place, but now we're going to pipe all that out to our plant about 2 miles down the river. And so as we sent out for contractors, the costs that were coming back from the contractors were higher than our initial estimates. Some of that's due to inflation, some of that's due to the complexity of the project. So we are increasing that project by $4 million. So just as a reminder, the summary is we're taking $15 million out of 8063 and moving it into 8086. Again, that's all in the same region. It's all in the same area around Lake Elmo. So it's just, some of it is just how we account for the different projects that are over there. And then we're growing the Hastings Wastewater Treatment Plant by $4 million to a total of $12 million. So it's a total of $29 million to the ACP, which is the Approved Capital Program. We use three-letter acronyms so much I forget what they stand for. But it is actually increasing our near-term budgeted ACP. That'll be paid for through our normal funding sources, which is our three sources are pay-as-you-go, which is our operating funds, Fund 31, sorry. Fund 31 is general obligation council bonds. Fund 41 is PFA, Public Facilities Authority. Are any of these PFA eligible? Or is this all general obligation bonds?
Actually, the Hastings Wastewater Treatment Plant and the Interceptors will be PFA funded.
Excellent, thank you. So with that, the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council amends the 2023 Unified Budget Authorized Capital Program with a reallocation of $15 million and an increase of $29 million as indicated and in accordance with the capital program environmental services. And on the business item itself, you'll see Table 10, which is that's the actual table that tracks the expenses in the unified budget, as well as the capital program table in Attachment 3. And just for a point of order or point of procedure, so after you approve it, assuming this is approved today, we will do a similar presentation tomorrow to the Management Committee, which combines all of the amendments. So Transit has some, Parks has some, so they'll all be in one giant business item that goes to Management Committee. Management Committee hopefully will approve, and then in 2 weeks, it'll go to the Council for general approval. And with that, Madam Chair, I will stand for any questions.
Are there any questions?
For the Interceptor project, what is the total cost of each of those projects?
So the, Madam Chair, there's 3 projects we discussed.
Right.
The L77 project, I believe, is in the neighborhood of about $7 million. The Lake Elmo extension is approximately $25 million. And the Hastings, I believe, was budgeted somewhere between $5 to $6 million for the design that's coming up. Give or take on those numbers, but those were generally the magnitudes of the construction values of those, or the design values for the Hastings and the construction values for the work that's in Lake Elmo and Woodbury.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Then we would be in need of a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, gentlemen. Next up on the agenda is 2023-128, ratification of declaration of emergency repair of Interceptor 7017-2 along State Highway 7 in Excelsior. We have Mr. Remus and Ms. Jacoby.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Chris Remus. I'm an assistant manager in Interceptor Engineering, and today I'm also joined by
Jody Jacoby, Director of Procurement.
And with that, we'll move forward with the business item as described by the chair. And with that, right away, I'm just going to turn it, yeah, nice segue. Turning it right over to Jody, just to give a little background on the procurement policies that are behind the emergency declaration process.
Thanks, Chris. So I just want to talk a little bit today, grounding you. Some new council members may not be familiar with the emergency declaration process. As you're aware, and as you'll see through these slides, that when there is an emergent situation such as this one, the procurement process, we do not have time to proceed with a competitive solicitation. An emergency, as defined by state statute, is one where it threatens the health, the safety, and the welfare of the general public. And when those conditions exist, we have an internal process, and as you'll see from the business item that's attached here, there's a form that outlines what's the emergent situation, what's the anticipated cost, and who are some of the contractors or a contractor that can come on site and start correcting this emergency immediately. And with that, any contract that's approved over $175,000 needs to come back to the Committee of Origin. And so for this project, the Environment Committee, and report back on what the emergency was and what the value was. And so an emergency declaration is an opportunity, again, once approved, to get the work started immediately. And so that's a little bit of background and grounding on how the procurement process works.
Thank you, Jody. Do I need to cover anything else in this slide? All right, thank you. So a little bit of the summary and location of the emergency. On May 22nd, the environmental service crews became aware of a reported leak that was just kind of in the northeast quadrant of Oak Street and State Highway 7 in the city of Excelsior. Excavation revealed that there was a leak in the side of the pipe, and the affected segment of that pipe was repaired later that afternoon on the same day. And the portion of this pipe, the force main, as shown, kind of from the connection to the L19 force main all the way back to L20 on the bottom of the slide, that force main will eventually be abandoned under a current contract that has just been awarded. And just additionally, I wanted to speak to the other collaborations within environmental services that took place beyond the Interceptor service crews who managed the pumping and routing around and cleaning up of the spill. We engaged Environmental Service Communications Group upon learning of the spill, and they got on board and helped us with informing both cities of Excelsior and Shorewood, along with an adjacent school, which is about that red block that says leak location. So it's directly adjacent to the spill area, and informing them just with kids and parents showing up that they were aware of what was going on, and local businesses that were nearby as well. They also help provide flyers to the adjacent residents of Galpin Lake, and at first kind of the immediate residents, and later on more coverage was included. I believe most of the lake residents were informed of that. And they also help prepare a website that residents could go find more information, both about the spill and looking on there, there's more water resources testing and how the condition of the lake is. And kind of speaking to that group of water resources, they were also involved. They came out to site that day and posted the signs to and stay out of the water essentially around Galpin Lake, and they begin testing. I believe that they performed 7 tests, and I think they went out there again today to look at the directly affected pond to take water quality test and determine if it's safe to be in the lake, et cetera. The entire lake was deemed safe for public contact on June 1st, and the signs were removed the following day from Galpin Lake. The adjacent stormwater pond that received a majority of the spill content is still being tested and evaluating the water quality of that pond. So just some project photos of the spill itself, the repair band installation. That's when they put a repair clamp around the pipe to stop the leaking. And the one on the right is showing kind of the hole in the pipe, and it's leaking out of the side at that point. And another photo just showing the restoration post-excavation. They're done with the work. They've restored the disturbed area with fiber blanket, and they're complete. So with that, the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council ratify the emergency declaration for repairs to Interceptor 7017-2 along State Highway 7 in Excelsior in the amount not to exceed $300,000. With that, I can be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Coleman.
Okay.
Or what?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
So my first question is, so the 300,000 that you're asking for, that's been used already in response to the emergency declaration. Is that correct? It's for the repairs that have already been done.
Yes, Madam Chair. Yeah, that is the estimated amount that we applied to the emergency declaration, and to get that going, and that we feel that is enough to complete the work that was already taking place now at this point.
Okay. So my other questions are really around risk mitigation, and I think we've had this conversation with some of the other the sinkholes and some of the other interceptor failures or around the system. And, you know, this one is of particular concern because of the surrounding environment. You know, it was over a week between when that Galpin Lake was safe for public use again versus when the leak was found. And do you have a sense, just based on the the volume of the leak, of how long that leak had been occurring, and if there were any public safety risks prior to the discovery of that leak?
All right. Yes, Madam Chair. Yes, you're correct. I think we'd spoke last time on that kind of just the difficulty to inspect force mains in general, because it is a closed system, and taking it offline and trying to inspect that is very hard to do, and this one's a single pipe. So that being said, yeah, I believe the spill we were notified that morning. I don't know the exact time of when the spill happened, if it was, you know, several hours before, but there was quantity in the ditch, so the risk would be if you were walking in there, that'd be the public health and the pond that it spilled in. And that's something that when we get on site, we work to clean that up and fence that area off and do the appropriate signage as the Water Resources group did in our construction group. And then your third question was related to the span of time from the spill to the, I do know a member of Water Resources is here. I wonder if Mr. Henley would care to answer that a little. That's.
So the Interceptor's improvement. Oh, yeah, yes, sir. The time between reporting. Madam Chair.
If you could come up to the mic, that would be wonderful.
Hi, I'm Bert Tracy, Director of Interceptor Services. From what we can tell, researching back after we got notified of the spill, we got notified of the spill like 11 o'clock Monday morning from Excelsior Public Works. They got called for a possible water main break. When they responded, they could tell by what it was that it wasn't a water main break. We got a pretty good working relationship with Excelsior. They called our dispatch right away. We were out there within the hour at noon trying to contain the spill. We had our Vector trucks out there vectoring the spill as it was coming up. This one is a little trickier because this force main is tied in with L19. L19's volume is such that it's continually pumping. So it looped back down to that leak. Even though L20 wasn't pumping very often, it was still feeding back through from L19. So once our crew got out there, we assessed the situation, got up there as quickly as we could to isolate the valve from L19 back to L20. Once we were able to do that, we were able to stop the leak and then vector out our lift station to keep up with the flow that was coming into there. And then we were able to get Valley Rich out. They basically, their expertise is emergency repairs. So that's why we were with them, did take care of that. But in our research and looking back, it looks like the break occurred sometime Sunday night, but we weren't aware of it until we were able to look back at our records and see where we saw a blip in a meter reading. So that's how we were able to calculate also the spill volume is the drop off through the meters in the time frame. So that's how we use the calculate as closely as we can to estimate. Now, as far as the volume into the lake, most of it went into that pond, and our contractor that did some pond remediation pumped 240,000 gallons out of that pond in order to clean that pond up. And our vectors were able to pump out 8,000 gallons into our vectors while we were trying to manage the leak. So there's a lot that goes on, and we sure don't like it when these happen.
Do you have any follow-ups? And I apologize for calling you Councilmember Coleman instead of Cameron.
I have one additional follow-up question and then a request for General Manager Thompson. And so my follow-up question is really what based on what you just shared, is there anything that could have been done to prevent the leakage? Is there anything more that we know coming out of the repair that we can use to kind of prevent these things from happening in the future? I know that we've talked before about how difficult it is to perform maintenance on these lines, but it is, when this happens, it is really it's an emergency, and that's why we have an emergency declaration process. So what can we do to help prevent this, and is there anything that we learned from this particular instance?
Chair Wolf and council members, we do have a pretty extensive assessment program of our gravity lines, and like Chris says, it's hard to assess our force mains, but knowing that, we are going back through and looking at our records of how old they are, trying to find out what type of soils they are, what type of pipe it is, and then we do an assessment on what's the possibility of it breaking. So this lift station was on schedule to be removed and isolated in gravity flow from L20 to L19, which Chris is that scheduled for next year?
Next year, 2024.
So we're aware of how fragile that pipe was. And there's certain areas, I mean, we try to stay ahead of it as best we can. We have a pretty aggressive preventative maintenance program. But even with the best program, accidents happen, and as an environmental services employee, it's really hard to take when we spill wastewater. That's, our goal is to keep it in the pipes.
So, yeah, I think we can all agree to that. You know, I think that as we're moving forward with this next budgeting cycle, that, you know, I don't want to speak for any other council members, but I would be committed to supporting any initiatives that support that ongoing maintenance in terms of funding, so that we're not, you know, the emergency mitigation is much more expensive than some of that maintenance work. And so I'm very supportive of increasing that funding for your maintenance crews to be able to get out there and do that work.
We appreciate the support, and we really do understand that preventative maintenance is the most affordable way of doing it. And getting our capital projects in a timely manner so that we can avoid these in the future is really a goal of all of us.
Oh, thank you. And then for General Manager Thompson, my request would be that as these emergency declarations are needed, if we could be notified as committee members, just that they're happening, just for our awareness in case it comes up in conversations. Or I don't know if Councilmember Carter was notified when this leak occurred, but I think just generally as committee members to have that information would be really helpful.
Well, especially for the person whose district it's in. if
Exactly, when they
calls,
come calling
That's
about
good
it,
to
yeah.
know.
So noted.
Thank you.
Councilmember Osmond, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just have one question. I think you might answer some of them. This is emergency situation repair. Do you have any long-term situation or solution for this particular incident?
For this incident, yes, because this lift station will be removed and that force main will no longer be used. So the type of repair they put on is a permanent repair. So even if we were going to continue to use this lift station, you saw that stainless steel full circle repair clamp. They are permanent repairs that, believe it or not, I started putting on in the industry about 40 years ago. So that lasts a long time. But yeah, we are going to remove that lift station and no longer use that
And
force main.
how old is this pipe?
I think this one is 50.
1971.
Okay.
Installed.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Not a question, just a comment. You know, just want to thank you all for the extremely fast service. I mean, get notified at 11 o'clock in the morning, and then by the afternoon, having it repaired, and within 9 more days, the lake's being open without any actual contamination to the lake, and it's open to public. So just thank you for the immediate response, and thank you for taking care of it.
And for pumping out the pond, because you wouldn't want to just leave that sitting there. Okay, if there's no other questions, then we would be in need of a motion
So moved.
in a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we don't have any information items, but we do have a general manager report.
Thank you, Chair Wolf. I have the work plan for the committee. Mentioned that, I think a couple meetings ago, that that'd be coming. You've got it in 2 forms. One is a list by category, the types of work that you'll do. So the top one is kind of those annual routine things that you can expect to see every year at a certain, probably about the same month. This is a year before. Budget, of course, which you've already been hearing about from Ned several times. But then there's key policy issues, and those will come up as there's a staging change that's coming, or maybe it's the regional planning role, that bigger piece that will be bringing issues to you for discussion and input. And then we always do information items based on providing more context for items that we're going to be bringing to you for action, but also we're open to requests. So if there's a topic that you have some questions that you'd like to fill in some of the gaps for yourself so you can understand it more fully, or you're curious about a change that's coming, because we always have emerging pollutants that are potentially going to affect us in the future, so let us know. we routinely will, I'll remind you, let us know if you've got any new information item requests. And then to figure out your schedule, which meetings do you want to make sure you're going to get to, we have a,
Well, we want to be at all of the
well,
meetings.
that is my assumption, but sometimes there's particular topics that are of higher interest, let's put it that way. There's an attached or a linked spreadsheet that we'll keep up to date on a quarterly basis, but we're not necessarily going to be able to commit to absolutely every one of those staying on schedule, because sometimes there's things that arise in our plan that causes staff to delay at a meeting or two.
Any questions or comments? Do you have any other information items for us, or is that it?
That's it.
Okay, well, thank you. And there being no further business to come before the committee, the meeting is adjourned.